Step 1.
I'm going to place a curved scud hook into the jaws of the vise and cover the hook shank with a tan tying thread. It's important on this fly because we're going to be using some translucent materials for the body.
Step 2.
I'm going to take a small length of white sparkle yarn and actually pull the yarn apart to isolate one strand and tie that in place right at the eye of the hook. Place a few wraps in front to cock the yarn at an upward angle and then bind it in place. Trim away the excess.
Step 3.
Take a length of fine copper wire, tie it in place along the near side of the hook, side facing the tire, and we're going to counterwind this rib, and this aids in the winding of the rib over the body later on. Secure that right down into the bend to imitate the common-like posture of the natural.
Step 4.
Tie in some medium red holographic mylar. Advance the tying thread just forward of the hook point, or just back of it. And then wind it 2 or 3 wraps up to form a distinct red butt that suggests the residual hemoglobin from the larval stage. Common trait on many chironomid pupa.
Step 5.
We're just going to cover up the butt of the mylar and build up a nice tan underbody. Again, the materials that we're going to use, the midge braid or frostbite, is quite translucent, and the thread color has an overall effect on the overall color of the fly.
Step 6.
We take our midge braid or frostbite, about an inch length, grab it and pull on it to unravel it. Breaks it down into 2 fine strands.
Step 7.
Tie in the midge braid, moisten it to keep the 2 strands together, and then pull it to length. Helps reduce the waste of material. And we're going to wind the body material backward toward the butt. Close touching turns all the way down. When we get to the butt, we're going to stop, reverse our direction, and carry the material back forward. Again, this provides a nice smooth body, allows the tire to cover up any mistakes, and when you overwrap a material with itself, it becomes quite durable. We can continue winding. We want to build up a slight taper, again to mimic the natural profile of the chironomid pupa. So we can go back and forth a little bit, using up the material. But again, we want to keep the overall profile of the fly very thin. Chironomid pupa are not thick in nature, and we want to duplicate that. Just going to tie that off and trim away the excess.
Step 8.
Take our fine copper wire and counterwind it over the body. Ideally, we want the second wrap to cover up the seam between the body and the butt. We continue winding forward in a nice even spacing to suggest the natural segmentation of the chironomid pupa. And then we're going to just pull on the wire and break it. And then we're going to whip finish the fly at this point because we're going to change thread colors to form an imitative thorax on this fly.
Step 9.
We're going to use a brown tying thread to imitate the darker thorax color and match the overall color of the fly that we're trying to suggest. Just bind and cover the entire front portion, thorax area of the fly.
Step 10.
Next, we're going to tie in a small length of pearlescent mylar that will be used for the wing case. I'm going to bind that in place down the thorax, trim off the excess, and leave the tag protruding out over the gills.
Step 11.
Now we're going to take some orange super floss, bind it in place directly along the side of the fly at the gills, secure it back along the thorax, pull it to reduce bulk, and then trim the excess.
Step 12.
We're going to repeat this process for the far side of the fly. Again, advance the tying thread up directly behind the gills. Take a small length of orange superfloss, about an inch is fine, manageable length. Bind it in place, place a few wraps. Make sure it's positioned properly along the side. Add some securing wraps, then pull on the floss to reduce bulk and trim away the excess.
Step 13.
Now we're just going to take our brown tying thread and cover up all our thread wraps here and build up a nice bulbous thorax that imitates the natural thorax of the emerging chironomid pupa.
Step 14.
And we're just going to take one wing pad at a time, pull it back gently and secure in place, and repeat this step for the far side. When we're pulling this back, we don't want to pull too tightly. We want it to be controlled, obviously, but if we pull too tight, when we trim away the excess that's hanging out the rear of the fly, the material being stretchy and elastic in nature has a tendency to slip and pull back out. And then we will bind the wing case in place as well, directly over top of the fly. And we'll just gently trim away the excess materials, superfloss and mylar.
Step 15.
We'll take our whip finisher and whip finish this fly at the rear of the thorax, placing the wraps one on top of each other to minimize thread bulk and maintain the natural, realistic profile we're trying to suggest here.
Step 16.
Take our gills, and we're going to trim them, and they should be about half the length of the thorax is a good proportional guide.
Step 17.
Now we're going to coat the entire body from head to toe with brushable super glue for added durability and shine. The shine represents the trapped air and gases chironomid pupa use to aid their pupal ascent. There we have a completed collaborator, tied what I call Clearwater style, where I've removed the gold bead and replaced it with wing pads.